Hi, welcome to my video on factoring x squared plus bx plus c. This is part one of factoring this trinomial. We just seen that trinomial. So let's see how we're going to factor. Factoring is the opposite of the multiplication. Remember, we multiplied the binomials in the previous two videos. Now we're going to reverse it. We're going to factor those. So we're going to work backwards. So what we learned just then in those previous two videos, we're now going to use here to see how it all fits. The set of integers will be used when factoring. So we're going to factor it over the I. Integers. We're talking about integers. So we're talking about like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, dot, dot, dot. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And we're talking about the opposites, which is going the other way. So that's the set of integers. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and their negatives. So the factors we're talking about here are integers. They're not fractions. They're not irrational numbers. So if we have two factors of 1 and 4, their sum is 5, and their product is 4. So that means if their sum is 5, if I have those factors in a 4 coming out of a trinomial, then I would have plus 5x plus 4. So these two factors are the factors that's going to be in your binomial. You'll see that in a minute. If I have factors of a -2 and a -3, the sum is -5 and the product is 6. So the trinomial coming out of the sum and the product will be x squared minus 5x plus 6, because the sum is the middle term and the product is the last term. The sum is 4 if you add them. The product is -5. So that's an x squared plus 4x minus 5. The sum is -1 and the product is -12. So the trinomial is x squared minus 1x, 1 is understood, minus 12. 7 and 2 added up is a 9. 7 and 2 multiplied is 14. So the trinomial is x squared plus 9x plus 14, because the sum is in the middle and the product is at the end, because that's your B and your C, remember? Sum is -11. Product is 30. So that's an x squared minus 11x plus 30. 8 and -4 is 4, and product is -32. So we get an x squared plus 4x minus 32. And h add -10, multiply 9, and that gives me an x squared minus 10x plus 9. So again, you can see how we're reversing it, but it'll all come together at the end. So we have 10 more here. Pause the video, work these out, and press play at the end and see if you got them all right. If you do, super. Sum 8, product 12, trinomial x squared plus 8x plus 12. Sum -7, product 10, trinomial x squared minus 7x plus 10. Sum is in the middle, product is at the end. Add 6, product -7. And the trinomial is x squared plus 6x minus 7, that's a 6. Sum -7, product -30. So that's x squared minus 7x minus 30. Sum is 12, product is 11, x squared plus 12x plus 11. Sum -13, product is 40, x squared minus 13x plus 40. Sum 1, product -42, so it's x squared plus 1x minus 42. Again, the 1 is understood to be there. Sum 11, product -12, x squared plus 11x minus 12. Sum, negative 12. Product, 3 nines are 27 positive. X squared minus 12x plus 27. Sum, negative 2. Product is negative 15. And the trinomial is an x squared. Sum goes in the middle, is minus 2x. Product is on the end, negative 15. Remember, the sum is your B, and that's your C. That'll be coming up later. Let's move to the next page. Find a pair of integral factors means integers. So remember, we're talking about the set of integers. We're not talking about fractions. We're not talking about irrational numbers. We're not talking about decimals. We're talking about integers, which are, again, 1, 2, 3, 0, and their opposites, negative 1, negative 2, negative 3. Find a pair of integral factors, integers, which have the given products and sum, and then the product of the two binomials and trinomial. Let me explain. If I have a product of 6 and a sum of 7, what are the factors? So what two numbers will multiply to give you 6? Well, this 6 is 6 times 1, and 3 times 2 as factor pairs. So which pair of factors here will give you a 7? So you'll have a 1 and a 6. So by writing these pairs down, you can see what the factors are going to be to give you the sum. The sum of 3 and 2 is 5. 1 and 6 is 7. So that's the pair. So if that's the factors, then the product of the two binomials will be x plus 1 and x plus 6. And the trinomial coming out of that, the trinomial has an x squared. Now, even though I got the product first, the sum is 7, so that's a 7x and a plus 6. So now we're beginning to put it together. You begin to see the pattern. So if you took these two binomials and multiplied the first term, you get an x squared. If you multiply the outside and the inside, you get a 6x and a 1x, and add together, you get 7x. And the last terms of 1 and 6 make 6. So the sum is 7, the product is 6, there's your trinomial. But when we factor this trinomial, we have these two factors which fit in here, x plus 1, x plus 6. So before, we given the sum and we had the product. Now in factoring, I have to reverse it. I have to look at the factors of this number. It's these numbers that will give me the sum. So I look at the product to give me the sum. Because if I got a 5 is 1 times 5, and there's no other choice. So if I multiply to get 5 and add to get negative 6, well, I got a 1 and a 5, but they're positive. So I have to make the two of these negative. Why? If the product is positive, I could have 2 pluses or 2 minuses. But if my product is positive and the sum is negative, it must be 2 negatives that I'm multiplying together to get a positive and adding to get a negative. And right here, if the product is positive and the sum is positive, it must be 2 positive numbers to multiply to give you a positive and add to give you a positive. And you put that in the binomial, that's an x minus 1 and an x minus 5. And the trinomial is an x squared, the sum is in the middle, and the product is at the end. So even though I'm doing product and sum like this, when I put it in the trinomial, it's the sum that goes in the middle and the product goes on the end. Let's continue. I have a product of negative 4, so that's a 1 times 4, or a 2 times 2. But if I multiply to get a negative, I must have a plus and a minus. So what two factors here are going to add up to give me a 3? They won't. So it must be a 4 and a 1. A 4 and a 1 will give me a 3. A 2 and a 2 will never give me a 3, no matter if I add or subtract them. But the product is negative, so one of these got to be positive and negative. If the sum is 3, That means it must be -1 and a +4. Multiply, -4, add 3. So that means I got an x minus 1 and an x plus 4 in my binomials when I multiply. And the trinomial is x squared, and the sum is 3, so that's a 3x, and the product is -4. So notice these factors that I'm working out right here fit into this binomial as the terms of the binomial. The product is -6. Let's go with this one. So that's a 1 times 6 and a 2 times 3. There's the factor pairs. So which pair of factors is going to give me a 1? 1 and 6, no matter what I do with them. Add 7, subtract 5, not going to work. It's the 2 and the 3 that's going to work here, because the 2 and the 3 differ by 1. If you add these, you get a 5. If you subtract them, you get a 1. So if it's a 2 and a 3, I have to have one of them negative, and the negative one must be the larger one. So 2, excuse me, 2 and a -3. So x plus 2, x minus 3. Multiply these two. -6, add -1. So the trinomial, x squared minus x minus 6. 8. Product is 8, so that's 1. I always do a 1 first. 1 times 8, 1 times 6, 1 times 7. And 8 is 2 times 4. The sum is 6. So what pair of factors here will give you a 6? 1 and 8, no matter what I do with 1 and 8, if I add them, I get 9. If I subtract them, I get a 7. No. 2 and 4 are the factors. Multiply 2 and 4. 8. Add 6. Notice the product is positive. And the sum is positive, so it must be 2 pluses. So x plus 2, x plus 4. And the trinomial is x squared. Sum is 6. 6x. Product is 8. 15 is a product of 1 and 15 and 3 and 5. 5 is a factor of 15. So which pair is going to give me an 8? 1 and 15 gives me 16 or 14. No good. 3 and 5 gives me an 8. Okay, that's good. But if the product is positive, I could have 2 pluses or 2 minuses. So I got 2 pluses or 2 minuses. But since the sum is negative, it must be 2 negatives. And it makes sense. There it is. And the trinomial is x squared minus 8x plus 15. And if you multiply that out by FOIL, first is x squared, outside -5, inside -3. That adds up to give me -8, and the last terms here is 15. So again, what factors of 15 will give you -8? Here we go. 9 is 1 times 9 and 3 times 3. We need an 8. 3 and 3, no matter what I do, will never give me an 8. If I add, I get 6. Subtract, I get 0. So 1 and 9 are the 2 factors. But the product is negative. That means I must have a positive and a negative factors. So if I got a positive and negative, which one will give me 8? So it's a -1 and a positive 9. That will give me the 8. Because when I add up, I get 8. When I multiply, I get 9. So x minus 1, x plus 9. And the trinomial is x squared. 8 is the sum. Product is -9. And let's continue. I have a -12. Now a -12 is 1 times 12, 2 times 6, and 3 times 4. You get used to writing these pairs down. Now I'm not teaching with big numbers, I'm teaching to understand. So I keep my numbers decent. So what pair of numbers will give me a 4? 1 and 12 gives me a 13, 11. Nope. 2 and 6, add. 8, 4. Oh, there's a 4 in here. So that's a 2 and a 6. 3 and 7, add. 3 and 4 is a 7 or a 1 if you add or subtract them. So it's the 2 and the 6 is going to work. But Because the product is negative, it has to be a plus and a minus. So if this is a plus and a minus, which one is going to be the negative? It's the negative 6 and the plus 2. Multiply, negative 12. Add, negative 4. So that gives me x plus 2, x minus 6. That's x squared minus 4x minus 12. Sum is first, product is. So, excuse me, work the 12 of these and see how you're going to make out. Pause the video and work these out. Here I go. Product is 1 times 16, 4 times 4, 2 times 8. Which pair gives me a 10? Nope. Nope. Oh, 2 and 8 gives me a 10. Remember, you add and subtract, excuse me, you add and subtract those. And the one that give you the 10 is the one you want. And there are 2 pluses. Multiply, right, add, perfect. The product is positive, the sum is positive, it got to be 2 positives. So x plus 2, x plus 8, x squared, sum is 10, product is 16. Sum is in the middle, product is at the end. 11 and 1, only 2 factors. So it has to be a 1 and 11, but the product is positive, the sum is negative, it got to be 2 negatives. Multiply, 11, add, negative 12, x minus 1, x minus 11. Trinomial, x squared, sum is negative 12, product is 11. 1 and 7 are the only 2 factors, so it has to be a 1 and a 7. The product is negative, so it's got to be a plus and a minus. Sum is positive, so it's a negative 1, positive 7. When you multiply to get a negative 7, it has to be 1 plus and 1 minus. And the larger one is a plus. X minus 1, x plus 7. X squared, 6x minus 7. Negative 8 is 1 times 8, 2 times 4. Which pair gives me a 2? 8 and 1 will give me a 9 or a 7. So it's 2 and 4. The sum is negative, so one number is positive and one is negative. But guess what? The larger number is going to be negative. Because when you add to get a negative, the larger one got to be negative. And so we have x plus 2, x minus 4. And that gives me x squared. Sum is negative 2. And the product is negative 8. 1 and 10, 2 and 5. Which pair gives me a 7? Not 1 and 10 gives me 11 or a 9. So it's 2 and 5. Product is positive, sum is positive, it's going to be 2 pluses. So x plus 2, x plus 5. X squared, sum is 7, 7 in the middle, product at the end. 9 is 1 times 9 and 3 times 3. Which pair gives me a 6? 1 and 9 gives me a 10 or an 8. So it's a 3 and a 3. So if the product is positive, I got 2 of the same sign. So it must be 2 minuses. Multiply, 9, add, negative 6. X minus 3, x minus 3. So the trinomial is x squared minus 6x plus 9. Sum is in the middle, product is at the end. 14 is 1 and 14, 2 and 7. And which pair gives me a 5? Not the 14 and 1, so it's 2 and a 7. One has got to be plus and one has got to be minus because it's a negative product. So the bigger number is negative when you add. So there's x plus 2, x minus 7. Trinomial is x squared minus 5x minus. Somebody might be saying, well, how do you know which number to put first? Well, it really doesn't make any difference. You put the 7 and the 2, but the 7, if you put the 7 first and then the 2, the 7 is negative, so it's negative 7 plus 2. So you could have x minus 7, x plus 2. It makes no difference. 15 is 1 and 15, 5 and 3. Which pair gives you a 14? 5 and 3, add 8, subtract 2. So it's 1 and 15. And you add to get, you multiply to get negative, so there's got to be plus and a minus. And if you add to get 14, that means the larger number got to be a plus. Multiply, negative 15. Add 14. So it's an x minus 1, x plus 15, which is x squared. Sum is 14 in the middle. Product is negative 15 on the end. Ooh, 40. We got a few numbers in 40. Let's go down here for 40. 40 is made up of 1 times 40. I see a 10, so I see a 10 times 4. I see a 2 because it's even, so I see a 20. And a 10 got a 5, so that means a 40 got a 5, so it's 5 times 8. Hopefully I got them all. So which pair is going to give me 13? Nope. Nope. 5 and 8 gives me a 13. If you add and subtract them, you should get the 13. So notice that's a 41 when you add 39. That's the add, you get 14, subtract, you get a 6. Add, you get 22, subtract, you get 18. So there's the two numbers, 5 and 8. Since the product is positive, sum is positive, has to be two positive numbers. Multiply, 40, add 13, perfect. X plus 5, x plus 8. So that's x squared, sum is 13, product is 40. And 21 is 1 and 21, and 3 and 7. Which pair gives you 10? Not those two. So that's a 3 and a 7. And product is positive, sum is negative. That means the two numbers got to have the same sign, so there's two negatives. And again, by now, there's a pattern forming. And the sum is negative 10. And the product is 21. You got to be careful. Now I'm looking at the 50. 50 is 1 times 50. I always do the 1 first. 50 got a 10. So therefore it's, because it got a 0, it's a 5. 50 got a 5. So that's 5 times 10. 50 is even, so I'll divide by 2, I get 25. So I got a 25, which is a 5 and a 5. Well, I think I have them all. So which pair gives me the 23? Nope. 23 is right here. So it's a 2 and a, oops. You can break that 2 times 25. 2 and a 25. Multiply. But because the product is negative, I have to have a plus and a minus. So I have to have negative 2 plus 25. Why? Because when I add to get a plus 23, that means the larger number got to be positive. So that's an x minus 2, x plus 25. And again, check, multiply those two, negative 50. Add 23. And the trinomial is x squared. Sum is 23, so it's in the middle with an x. And on the end is a negative 50. And we have a 20. 20 is 1 times 20. It's a 10 because it's a 0 times 2. It's got a 5 because it ends in a 0. 5 times 4. And do we have them all? 4 got a 2. We got the 2 there. So which pair gives me an 8? That's a 21 and a 19. Nope. 10 and 2 gives me an 8. 5 and 4, if you add, gives you 9. And subtract gives you 1. Nope. So 10 and 2, negative products, so it's a plus and a minus. So which one is the plus and which one is the minus? So it's a minus 10 plus 2. Because when you add, you got to have a negative number, negative 8. So the larger number is negative. So it's an x minus 10 and an x plus 2. Trinomial, x squared. Sum is negative 8 with an x with a negative 20. Plenty of practice. Hopefully you see the pattern that I developed and everything is going well. And let's find the product of these. Let's FOIL first, outside, inside, last. So you say, yep, I know what to do. First, outside, inside, last. And we're adding up the like terms. Negative 5x. First, outside, inside, last. Add up the like terms, 1x. First, outside, inside, last, add, x squared minus 1x minus 6. Again, practice the FOIL, but there's a reason I'm showing you this to have these in front of me. When the two binomials are multiplied, the last term of the trinomial is a 6 or negative 6. Positive if the signs of the binomial are the same. We practiced that just then. So there's a rule here we're going to follow now. So when you multiply and you get the last term is positive, then the signs are the same. And the signs are the same as the middle term. So when you multiply and get a positive, the two signs that you'll have is going to be the same as the middle term. Notice you multiply and you get a plus, but the middle term has a plus. So if you multiply these two and get a plus 6, then the middle term is going to be a minus. So if your product is positive, then the two signs will be the same as your middle term, same as your sum, because your sum is in the middle, same as your b is in the middle. If negative, the signs of the binomials are different. That means different means what? You have a positive and you have a negative. So when I factor, I'm going to use this pattern. But right now, let's just go through what we have here. Let's work through these and see. For each trinomial, place the correct signs in the blank. Fill in the signs. That's all I want you to do is to fill in the signs. Don't fill in anything else. Follow. If it ends in a plus, I have two pluses or two minuses, but the middle one tells me the sum is plus. So I got two pluses. If I multiply to get a plus 5 product and the sum is negative, I got two negatives. If the product is positive and the sum is negative, so these two signs will be the same as that middle one. If the product is negative, I'll automatically have a plus and a minus. If the product is negative 8, I'll have a plus and a minus for my signs. If the product is positive, I'll have two of the middle signs, so it'll be two minuses. If the sum is positive, if the product is positive and the sum is negative, it must be two negatives. And I have multiply to get negative 18, that must be a plus and a minus. So you say, well, what about the plus? Can you do a minus and a plus? Well, go ahead. It make a difference as long as you have the two of these signs different. I always put, if I got a plus and a minus, I always put the plus first. There's a reason for that when we go on to the second set of videos on factoring number 2. I do plus first, minus second when I always factor. Practice, work all these out, and press play to see if you're right. Product is positive, so I got two of those. 2. The product is negative, I'll have a plus and a minus. The product is negative, I'll have a plus and a minus. The product is negative 5, I'll have a plus and a minus. The product is positive, so I'll have two of those, two pluses. The product is negative, I'll have a plus and a minus, guaranteed. The product is negative, I'll have a plus and a minus. If the product is positive, what happens? I'll have two of those middle signs, two negatives. Why? If the product is positive and the sum is negative, it has to be two negatives. Let's continue. So, we're talking about the trinomial, which we'll have, there's a 1 right there, where the A is 1. So we got a B and a C. That's the sum, and that's the product. Just remind you. There's two rules that I'll use. I'll say, I learn them. I learned them ever since I was in grade 9, and I use them to this day. The two sign rules when factoring a trinomial as a product of two binomials. Two sign rules are what? Here they are. If the last sign of the trinomial is positive, then you'll have a product that's positive. That means C is positive. So each binomial must have the same sign, which is the sign of the middle term. That is the sign of, which is the sum in the middle term. That's the sign of B. So if the product is positive, I'll have two signs, which is the same as the sum, which is two pluses. If the product is positive, which is positive 10, I'll have two signs, which is the same as, there's the sum. That's the middle term. That's the b. So I'll have a negative, negative. So multiply, positive, add, positive. Multiply these two signs, positive, add, negative. So if the product is positive, you'll have two of those signs right there. If the last sign of a trinomial is negative, that means the product is negative. That means the same c is negative. The binomial must have different signs, plus and a minus. The product is negative 7, so I will guarantee to have a plus and a minus. The product is negative, I'll have a plus and a minus. Makes no difference what's in the middle. If you've got a negative product, you must have a plus and a minus. Anyway, we're learning the pattern. We're getting ready to factor. Let's go on to the next video. If you like what I'm doing, click the like button, click the subscribe button if you're not a subscriber, and the notification bell if you are a subscriber. There's more videos coming. Write a comment on my video if you wish, and visit my math website at mathfullyexplained.com. There you'll have information in 3 sections. Me is about my degrees and teaching experience. The video talks about the teaching strategies you're going to use to help you learn your math. The content section has the topics and the number of videos on each topic. And the black font is what's online right now. And the red font is the topics that will be there in the near future. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.